Welcome to District 32, immersion, inspiration for ambitious business owners with big dreams.
Hello, my name is Lorraine of District 32. I'm really excited to be here today with Sarab Singh of the Corporate Sherpas. How are you, Sarab?
I'm very well, thank you, Lorraine, and hello everyone who's listening and into this.
Well, I'm really excited because I've heard you and Kamar present before a few times now, one of at some of our events, and I'm really excited to have you speak again at one of our events. But I think one of the most, that content was amazing. I loved it. But I keep talking about how you invited us to go and listen to your launch of your brand and to introduce us about your brand and the different colors that you'd incorporated. And I just thought that that was the best brand introduction, or it was the most impactful presentation I've ever seen on an introduction to a brand, where I felt 100% emotionally connected to you and your brand and what you stand for.
Oh.
So on that note, give us an overview of Corporate Sherpas. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you for those comments as well. That is wonderful. What a great feedback to get on something that we actually don't pride ourselves. So we've been doing this for some time, and only now, after some pushing from some friends, they said you need a better brand presence. That we organized that evening, and a new brand launch. So let me actually just go back to what you said, because it is not how we see ourselves.
Yeah.
We see ourselves
we never do though.
No. So I'm so thrilled that it had an impact on you on that evening. We see ourselves as just a couple of nerds. Kamar and I are just passionate about what we do. So everything else is the fallout of that. But I'm going to actually hold on to what you said for a very long time, because what I hope what came out of that brand launch was just some sincerity around what we do and who we are, and I think that was good advice that we got. So nothing was planned it wasn't a corporate event as such. It was actually just, we wanted to embrace our friends and share with them what we know, and there are things that we know about that aren't common knowledge, and so it gives us an opportunity to actually explain that. So that was the first thing that I caught on. Now to your question about what is Corporate Sherpa, or what we do.
Yeah.
Look, we both Kamar and I have been truly blessed and incredibly fortunate to have followed our passion in understanding human behavior and understanding more deeply our own neurobiology around why we think the way we think, why we behave the way we behave, and the impact we have on others, and so forth, and becoming really conscious of ourselves, particularly as leaders and in leadership roles. And it was certainly not by design, but we find ourselves today, that topic becoming even more powerful and useful in the context that we are in right now. So if somebody thinks it was a really well-planned business idea, it wasn't. It's just a couple of nerds.
Are they?
No, never are. So this is just a couple of nerds doing what they love doing, and it just happened to be, everyone's interested in this. Oh, this is great. So we've got, I've certainly devoted about 2 to 3 decades of my life to this field, and so has Kamar, and we are thrilled to be serving people. And in fact, interestingly enough, the word Sherpa comes from our hero is Tenzing Norgay, who actually was Sir Edmund Hillary's Sherpa, who took him up to Mount Everest. Although Sir Edmund Hillary is recognized as the first man to climb up Mount Everest, less is known about his guide. And so that gives us a position of humility and self-assuredness, but it's not our journey. It's actually the leaders who we serve, it's their journey, and we're all about that.
And that message in itself was just that is what really resonated with me. I have actually told others of you on that evening explaining this and what the Sherpa was, and I would say to people, did you know what a Sherpa was? Did you know what that was? Do you know what that means? I thought it was really, really great, and it's something that we can all relate to and hang on to. You know, that's what we need in business. We don't need a magic wand or someone to do everything for us. We don't want to do someone else to do it for us. We're just looking for that guidance and the roadmap.
Absolutely, it is, and I think that's and the connection you have, the bonds you make are lifelong, it really is about, you know, the beautiful thing about human potential is what gets us out of bed with some springs on every morning to say how much more help we can actually give to people. In fact, our word, our values are based on an acronym, or the word, or Punjabi word is my religion where I come from. It's called Seva, S-E-V-A. So Seva is dedicating yourself to service of others. So that's something that ties our past and future, and really it's an incredible journey. It's a very fulfilling journey as a couple of entrepreneurs, if you want to call it, to be able to follow your passion and have a abundance of, you know, all of our thinking, all of our emotional intelligence, and all of our spiritual intelligence, all combined in what we do.
I think it's really important that, you know, we have organizations like yourself who talk to us as human beings, not as employees or staff or team, or, you know, and all these things are important in leadership, but we're human beings. We actually do have feelings. We do have communicate, you know, we need to communicate and feel belonging, and at the core, you know, we need to work with organizations where that's okay for us to talk at that level. It's okay for us to be human. It's okay for us to be vulnerable. It's okay for us to make mistakes.
I was going to say, Lorraine, so I'm sure through this time that we're going to spend together today, there's going to be stuff that comes out of in this conversation that you go, okay, that was mindful. But one of the fundamental things that we have to understand is human beings have never, ever liked being managed. None of us like being managed. We like our freedom. We like our autonomy. We like our own sense of who we are and our personalities. So we love receiving direction. We love receiving guidance. We actually follow good leaders, but that's our choice. But if you manage me, then I'm not going to play with you, right? So
I'm not going to play nice. Yeah.
That's right. So I'll just do the necessary, but internally I will not have all of that compassion for you. Whereas processes need to be managed, systems need to be managed, and so that opens up a whole new conversation around, okay, there is a difference between leadership and there is a difference between authority, and fundamentally right at the start of it we unpick that, because the word leadership has been used and abused for years now, right? And what people dish out is not leadership. It is exercising their authority, which is important, but but in the right context.
It's very interesting you say that, because I was having another conversation with another I would say he's very much a leader, and he asked me, we're having this conversation around what is leadership and how would you define leadership, and he says, let's do an experiment, you know, let's go onto LinkedIn and actually ask the question, what is leadership? And there are, you know, 50, 60, 70 different answers to what leadership actually is. So it's always an interesting question. Is leadership the conversation, you know, that you're having? So it's really interesting. I'm looking forward to exploring that. But what is leadership to you, Sarab? How would you define leadership?
Well, let me actually, because I'm a very visual person, so let me actually explain that in a couple of analogies, right? So to me, I'm gonna make a case for comparing a cruise liner that floats on top of the water, highly mechanized, highly orchestrated, has a good command and control system. And I'm going to compare that with a school of fish that live underwater, right? So the cruise liner that's floating on top of the ocean usually has a pretty wide turning circle. And if you want to turn left or right or whatever, then somebody needs to say, okay, let's turn left. And the bridge then tells the captain then issues the command to one of his officers. That sends a message to the chief engineer then says to somebody else. And then one person then presses the button and the ship tries to turn left or right, whatever the case might be. Way too long. Way too long. And imagine that and compare that to a school of fish that live underwater. And that school of fish has got inherent intelligence within the group. Everyone, there is no one authority that leads the group from one opportunity to another, away from one risk to another. We all surrender to that collective leadership role, and it's a choice of leading. So if I see an opportunity, then it's my responsibility to take the group towards that. And if I see a risk, it's my responsibility to take the group away from that. And so when we actually are looking out as a more connected group, then anyone can take a leadership role as to which direction we're going and what opportunities we're chasing and what we're not and where we're moving away from. And so that brings a whole new story about, in essence, leadership is not role specific. It is, if you've got the insight, if you've got the capacity, then it's an opt-in exercise to say, I'm going to exercise some leadership here, and I'm going to lead the group somewhere. So it is fundamentally, it's about facilitating. Fundamentally, it's about influencing for action.
I love it. Every time I steal it, I'll reference you, Sarab. Yeah.
Go for it.
I think it's really great because I think well, what I picked up from there though as well is it's each of our responsibility to step up and lead the way if we see something that can make a difference. You know, we're not serving anyone to stay quiet.
No.
It's our duty. We have got a duty to serve and lead others where we know where there can be a benefit.
Indeed, because it's you know, when the pace of change in the environment that we're moving into, and one of the things that we should talk about is, we've been talking about this VUCA world that's upon us. I've, you know, certainly since 2017, I've been on speaking circuits, and so is Kenwa. We talk about the VUCA, the VUCA acronym is for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That term has actually been used and adopted from the armed forces and military, because every mission is a VUCA mission. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex and ambiguous, because we just don't know what will unfold and we have to respond to it. And so our corporate world has become more and more VUCA. Things happen overnight and has significant ramifications to guys in a garage and making up something, and then tomorrow the whole taxi industry is disrupted, or the restaurant industry has kind of had to change its ways, or there's no Blockbuster anymore. So, you know what I mean? So things change, and if we had organizations that don't adapt to the pace of that change, then that's a very dangerous thing to happen. So one of the fundamental things around change is that if we recognize that the change outside the organization is faster than the change inside the organization, then, as they say, the end is near, right?
Yeah.
So to exercise that, we need to operate with flexibility, and the leadership becomes even more important. And so it's, if I'm chief executive of an organization, I'm not going to have that insight or a viewpoint on the front line, and I will not be able to make the decisions quick enough, fast enough to respond to those challenges. So I have to delegate my leadership to the person who's got the capacity and the opportunity to exercise it.
Mhm.
So that, and nobody can remain silent.
Yeah, and I love how you articulate your stories for our learning. It's really great. And I've been having a few conversations with business owners just over the last few days in a couple of events around team and employees and members of the team being able to handle the change. And there's a time stamp on this, but in the world of at the time of lockdowns and COVID, it's affecting everyone in very different ways. You know, some are so overwhelmed because they're just drowning in work and opportunities. There's others, you know, this is talking from the business owner point of view, there's others who are struggling. But what I've been finding is when I've been having conversations, it's how do we help teams to navigate through change, because people don't necessarily like change, and especially fast and often. You know, so this month we're doing this, no, we're going to do this, no, we're going to do this. How do we use some of your wisdom, and how would you guide us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of questions in there, so just let me answer the more direct one. Is how do we? Absolutely, we think nobody likes to change, but we are very conditioned to change. If we didn't change, we would still be in caves, or some of us will still be having those, you know, the rotary telephones. But that's not the case. We do change. We just don't give ourselves enough credit for it. And change is hard because change is not brain friendly, right? And look, our you know, backgrounds in neurobiology and neuroscience, and we use a lot of that alongside organizational psychology and behavioral economics to understand ourselves. And so we know for a fact that every time we have to change something, or change our surrounding, or do something differently, our brain has to use our cognitive energy. And our brain, as wonderful as it is, it's a beautiful organ. You know, we're not the biggest or the fastest of the animal kingdom, yet we're on the top of the food chain, right? So we create music, we create art, we do wonderful engineering with it. It's fantastic. But one of the critical limitations we have in our brain is that it's an energy hog. So something that weighs about 2 to 3% of our body weight actually consumes up to 25% of our energy levels. So now if you think about it through that, so every time you ask me to change, I'm going to have that cognitive load. And what I've learned through evolutionary biology is that if I spend a lot of my energy without replenishing it, then from a brain's point of view, I'm dying, right? So I have learned to conserve my energy at every step. So remember when you first started to learn how to drive a car, how difficult it was?
All about
and
mechanics.
Yeah, and I have to use the indicators. There's a clutch, there's a brake, there's an accelerator. And what are you saying? I have to wash my mirrors and then turn, and I anticipate a whole lot of things. And now your brain has learned it once or twice or 3 times, and now it remembers. So now it moves from the cognitive load to a more subconscious function. And so it's easier. And when you ask me to change things, I have to go back on my cognitive load, my conscious mindset, to now change again. And every time you ask me to do that, I'm going to get more and more fatigued. I'm going to get more and more tired. And I'll go, no, Lorraine, I'm not playing with you anymore, because you make me change all the time. And because if I keep changing all the time, I'm dying. If you make me think and rethink, I'm going to die. So I'm not playing with you. I'd rather just go away and rock in a dark place for a little while and get my energy levels back.
Wow. You have to use that when explaining people. Again, this is just a wonderful way of explaining to people what stress and change does energetically.
Yes, absolutely. So that's what happens at a more biological level for us and a psychological level for us. So if leaders understand that, we also know there are some really good tools and techniques to help people move through some of these cycles. And there's a we actually do a big program around, how do you move people through the stages of denial, resistance, depression, acceptance, and commitment. Now, whether that's a systems change or IT change, or your desk has been changed, or the color of your lunchbox has changed, it's the same reaction. Right?
Okay.
So it does not matter whether you move a desk or you move a country, it's still the same emotional kind of response that we have. So once leaders can understand that a bit better, we can actually communicate with people a lot better, and we can actually provide. I think the essence is to help. As leaders, it's our responsibility to help people move through change with the dignity of time.
Yeah, I love that word, with dignity. Yeah,
absolutely, because we all change at a different rate, but we all change. So it's about you as a leader picking who is where are you first of all, and only then you can actually cycle it. But I think just understanding the context and actually communicating is a very important one. There's other things around, when the change is enforced upon me, then I'll feel again, I'm not playing because you've taken my autonomy, you're managing me. But if I'm part of the change process, if I understand the why we need to change, and the criticality of the time, then of course I'm going to make the effort and I'm going to change. I'm still going to get tired, so we'll still need some time to recuperate, but I'm going to play with you a lot better.
Love it.
There you go.
So listen, Sarab, I think some of the words that I've heard you use throughout your presentations, and just the language that we use when we're talking about leadership or change, and some of the terms you've used are around social capital, behavioural economics. What is social capital? What is social capital? Why do we need to be concerned about that as leaders? And
yeah, absolutely. So in our industry, in our world, we've been using and we know about social capital, because what happens is, just like we have financial capital for businesses, and over the last few years, people have been talking about human capital, although I don't like that word, but let's just call it human resource capital, if you want to call it, is one thing. But what's really important is the networks that exist within the people inside the organization, the goodwill that exists within the people inside the organization. And that is social capital. Okay. So you might have 10 people with fantastic IQs in a group, but there's dysfunction amongst that, right? And you might have another group of 10 people with, well, the IQ is not as good as the previous group, but there is strength in connection and networks, and that will outfight the group of guys or girls with high IQs any day. So wow. you may have heard in the sporting arena, it's quite evident. There's a concept called a team of champions and a champion team. There is a marked difference, because people have generosity, they have goodwill, they have perceptiveness for each other, they have anticipation for each other, and they're there to support, so that together we flourish, as opposed to infighting that happens. In fact, Kenmar normally talks about super chickens, an average flock. So we know the average flock, if there is greater level of empathy, there is a greater level of patience, that will outperform the super chickens any day.
I think it's just such an important concept to grasp for leaders. because if we don't understand that concept, then we're still chasing the IQ and the great resume, if you like, but not how they're going to fit in with the existing network or the existing team. And that's what's going to have such an impact on the success of the team or the output from the teams.
Absolutely. So we most organizations still follow the super chicken model, right? So but in fact we make super chickens in our organizations who suppress the productivity of other chickens.
Yeah.
Right? They steal the opportunity away from others to look good or to deliver outcomes or targets and results. But if we rethought that process and said, okay, so how are we going to get the collective performance going up and up every year? That requires a whole different levels of skills and mindsets, and a whole different strategy around how we're going to recruit people and who we're going to recruit. Right? So, and alongside that, I want to debunk another myth that you would have heard in the years gone by, say people are our greatest assets. That's simply not true. That is actually simply not true. People are, first of all, not your assets. They choose every morning to come to work. You don't own them, right? So asset is something that I own and I can trade it in or whatever, but I don't own anyone. I don't even control anyone. I'm grateful for the choice they make to come and work with me every day. So first of all, technically they're not your asset. But what is more valuable is the relationships we curate and the relationships that we kind of bind together between the people and between the team itself. That is really valuable. That is an asset that you can bank.
And that comes under the banner of social capital. Yeah. So,
absolutely.
And where does the behavioral economics come into that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting. So I'll actually say one of Kanwar's favorite sayings, and he says, "We know that human beings are predictably irrational beings."
And we know that with certainty. Yeah.
We know that with certainty, right? So 2 + 2 is, in our mind, is not 4, right? 2 + 2 is, I don't like the shirt you're wearing. 2 + 2 is, I think you've got something against me. 2 + 2 is, I'm not want to play with you, go away, right? So it's we don't necessarily make good rational choices. In fact, behavioral economics, the study of that, says nearly 100% of our decisions, almost all of our decisions, are actually emotional decisions, which have been justified or rationalized afterwards. So the shirt I'm wearing, the house I'm living in, the car I drive, the person I'm with, even the biggest and the smallest decisions of my life have been the choice architecture in the brain is actually from an emotional sense. So we make a decision based on emotions first, and then we pretend to justify them because we can rationalize afterwards. And behavioral economics, a deeper understanding of that, allows leaders to kind of go, okay, so if logic alone won't get me there. Logic alone won't convince people. They need to buy into what we're doing and why we're doing it. There needs to be a higher purpose. And there are many companies and organizations that are so successful that don't operate from the rational decision paradigm. And so actually it's a newer space of study for us as a society, but it's nevertheless a very important one. And so
how does that translate for business leaders then, if we can understand that as a concept, that we have to find emotional triggers? What does that actually look like on the day-to-day management of a team? Is it do we then have to have more one-to-ones? Do we have to have more team activities? Do we have to go and dig deep into the values of the individuals to make sure that we're talking on that level? How does that translate for leaders and managers?
Great question. I think this is alongside this for us, this sits in the framework of being able to combine our IQ, so people's IQ, with their EQ, an emotional quotient, as well as their spiritual quotient. And when I talk about spiritual quotient, it's not necessarily has any religious or spirituality kind of context. It's the spirit of generosity. In fact, I'm going to use Qantas's ad from last night I was watching on TV, the spirit of Australia, right? And or the Australian spirit when we talk about our Olympics and Olympians. So that is a SQ, the spiritual, that spirit quotient, if you want to call it for that. If we can combine that, that surrounds itself around people's purpose and calling in life, and gives them the higher meaning and connection with their emotional intelligence and their intellectual intelligence. Being as a leader, if we're able to combine that, that is the way of a future leader. And that's, so you need to have some elements of behavioral economics. So if I give you a good example, right? So if somebody says, Lorraine, here's $10, right? But you can only keep $10 if you part with some part of those $10 with Sarab, and he has to accept your offer, right? For you to be able to keep that. But if you part with a certain amount, I'm in my own capacity to reject it. So no, I want a better share of that, right? And so if that offer is rejected, you also don't get the $10. So how much would you offer me? So out of those $10,
the immediate answer is 50-50, $5.
It doesn't need to be that high, right? So immediate answer is 50-50. But the rational paradigm decision would say you could give me 1 cent and I should accept your offer out of those $10.
Because it's okay.
Because it's 1 cent that I didn't have before. Right? Because the offer gets rejected, not only you don't get the $10, I also lose the potential 1 cent. So I'm not maximizing my rational decision here, because I'm coloring it with emotions of what is right and what is justified and what's morality, what is a fair thing to do, right? So can you see how quickly our mind goes into that? And out of the pure a computer would make a decision to say, if you give me even if you give me 1 cent, I'll take it, thank you, because that's 1 cent I didn't have before. So that explains it.
It's really simple as well, if we just take time to think about it. I'm probably, there's so much stuff that I just love talking with you, and there's so much stuff I could delve into. I do want to ask you to taking a little bit of a turn. Tell me about the age of the imagination.
Yeah, good. Look,
I'm introducing that because I've seen it on some of your branding. You were talking about the age of imagination, and it's a topic that I'm interested in myself. I do a lot of study on, on how the imagination creates as the creator of, and how we don't spend so much time in that arena, in our heads, or facilitate environments where it's conducive to imagination or creativity. And then I saw your banner when you talk about the age of imagination. I'm like, I must talk to them about that.
Oh, brilliant. So one of the things I think I'm blessed with is being able to read the slow change that happens to us, and look, part of that I'm grateful for. So previously to what we do, I was a customs officer for many years, and I was an executive with them as well. So we kind of try and make sense. I've learned through a very young age to make sense of the world and make sense of the context that we're dealing in. So alongside with that, one of the things that I've been talking about is that if you think about it, our business context up until the 80s was very much a very industrial construct. So it was the very industrial age, let's call it for that, right? And then suddenly we moved in from industrial age to information age, right? And in the industrial age, it was the distribution, the economies of scale, the industrialization, cheaper, faster products. Those were the companies that won, that were able to utilize the economies of scale and produce it much cheaper, much more volume. And when we moved into the information age, out of the industrial age, we focused more on data and information. And that's, we relied more and more on the internet, and knowledge became crucial. And the people who had the knowledge or the ability to access knowledge almost always won compared to the people in the industrial age. But over the last decade or so, we have moved out of the information age into imagination age, right? You combine that now with the VUCA environment that we deal with. So it's not just having access to information anymore that is going to provide any organization or team with competitive advantage. What's going to provide competitive advantage is the amount of creativity and imagination they can garner from the teams. Right? So when industries are being disrupted, so have a look at the top 5 or 6 companies in the world right now, whether it's Apple, whether it's Tesla, whether it's Amazon, you name it, right? Almost all of them have reached where they are because they have been able to leverage their own people's imagination and creativity, where they've disrupted the industry or they've disrupted the sector, and suddenly they've just had this very powerful competitive advantage, if you want to call it that. So we as leaders have to respect the context that we're now operating in, because information is everywhere, but it's what you do with the information. And if we treat people like drones, and if you treat people, and because some of the leadership or management, I should call it, is still thinks that it's actually about task performance. We still manage for task performance in terms of what tasks have we done in a day or in a week or in a year, and we aggregate that and go, well, yeah, that was a good year or not. But it's actually less about task. It's more about cognitive performance. It's more about what have we imagined over the last week? What have we imagined over the last month or the last year? And how we've progressed our organization forward and created more value for the people that we serve. So when you come into that space, we as leaders kind of have to say, so how do I now lead for cognitive performance as opposed to task performance? And that defines the age of imagination, because still my biggest misgiving in this world is I think that the best, it's a bit morbid, but I'll say it, the best library of good ideas are the graveyards that we've got. Countless people have taken their best ideas with them. We just, as leaders, have just not been able to capture that and harness it. And just imagine if we're able to pick up all the intellect, the collective creativity and imagination that we have, just the potential for that moving forward is huge. We've not even scratched the surface. And previously, when you spoke about change and disruption and all of that we're coping with, I want to give a different view to that. I said, mother of all inventions is necessity, right? So the fact that we're in COVID, we're in lockdowns, and we have to now, we're in crisis. I always have the belief that why would anyone want to waste a crisis?
Yeah.
Because it's the most fertile ground for new ideas, for better ideas, and to rethink the way forward. Because the reality for me is often good ideas come in the way of great ideas. So when we are forced with a crisis, that's really important that we take time to challenge our good ideas to see if there's a great idea just lurking behind it.
Sarab, thank you very much. There are other things that I'd love to just explore. I could probably sit here and talk to you all day, but I actually just really love the tone there, and I think it's a great place to finish today's interview. Your insights, your wisdom, your analogies, your stories all land very well to the listener. And you have encouraged, you encourage questioning. And where do we start? And you said that, leaders should start by, asking the question, how do we work with people more on a cognitive basis rather than a cognitive understanding, rather than how do we better perform these tasks? And I think that's just a great place to start, just by asking that question.
Indeed, it is. Look, thank you for the opportunity to have this dialogue. As you can see, this. I hope the passion comes through, and we made some sense for the people listening into it. I will take your compliments, but they do make us feel really uneasy. So I will kind of tone it down and say both Kamo and I are just a couple of average chickens, alongside with Robbie, who's
really well.
and we collectively, and Robbie, who's our resident magician, is shout out to Robbie as well. And he's the three of us do make
magic.
We create magic.
So look, thank you very much for your time, Sarab. I'm sure anyone listening is going to pick up some real gems there and encourage new questioning and new avenues for exploring. I'm really looking forward to hearing you both present at another one of our events. And I'll also, if you don't mind, I'd love to just pop your details underneath this video, so that if anyone would like to start that conversation or look at developing their own organization, that they can reach out to you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I've loved speaking with you, and I'll speak to you again very soon.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. Take care.
Thanks, Sarab. Bye.
You've been listening to District 32, Immersion, Inspiration for Ambitious Business Owners with Big Dreams.